Hello and welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you so much for joining us for another segment. Incyte is now accepting entries for their third annual Incyte Ingenuity Awards Program. Our guest this morning is Meredith Cowden. She's joining us here as Incyte Ingenuity Awards judge and founder of the Meredith A. Cowden Foundation. She's joining us to talk about Gvhd and the struggles faced by those impacted by this condition and how this award can give this community hope. Welcome to Health Professional Radio. Meredith Cowden, thank you for joining us, and nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you, too. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this.
Well, give us a little bit of insight into who Meredith Cowden is. Tell us a bit about yourself and your foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a cancer survivor. I developed AML when I was 19, and so I had a bone marrow transplant, and quickly following the transplant, I developed acute graft-versus-host disease, and then that transitioned into chronic graft-versus-host disease. And so, you know, with the treatment, there were a lot of ups and downs and a lot of different manifestations of graft-versus-host disease. And so my family decided to, when I was going through a particularly difficult time, my family decided to create a foundation because we had such a hard time finding information about things that I could do at home, treatment, all of the different kinds of things that we could do to address what I was specifically going through at that time. So the foundation was created in 2007, and early on, we did a lot of fundraising, and we started to develop having symposia, like annual, maybe 1.5 years, every 2 years or so, directly focusing on combining patients with medical professionals, because that kind of connection is so important, and I think sometimes not always possible in the best way that it could be. And so it enabled them to have conversations that they might not otherwise have, as well as we present topics on, you know, the most recent forms of treatment for graft-versus-host disease, as well as various specific organ manifestations and what patients and caregivers can do. So it's that's our main focus. And then this year we're adding a bit more in terms of more focus on patient advocacy and patient education as well. Yeah.
Now, what is graft-versus-host disease, or GvHD? I heard you mention that you had a bone marrow transplant, and after the transplant, you developed graft-versus-host disease.
It's quite a monster, actually. So graft-versus-host disease, if you think about like a solid organ transplant, so you take somebody, like say someone's having like a heart transplant or something, and you give them a new one. You know, a lot of times what happens with those is that the concern is whether or not the recipient's body will reject the organ. And so if you think about a bone marrow transplant, you're transplanting somebody's bone marrow. And so basically you're transplanting their immune system. So my sister was my donor. And so they wipe out your own immune system during chemotherapy and whatnot. And then I got my sister's bone marrow, her immune system. And so then the thing that happens is that the other person's immune system doesn't recognize the recipient's body as home, basically. And so then it starts to attack various different organs because it's basically seeing your body as an invader when it's actually within your body. And so it can attack or affect pretty much all organs. It's, you know, it has various manifestations to different degrees and different, forms. And sometimes there are, like, for instance, one thing that I have polymyositis as a result of graft-versus-host disease. So it's not graft-versus-host disease itself, but it happened because I have it, if that makes sense.
As frustrating as it must be for the patient, it's got to be frustrating for the caregiver as well.
Absolutely. It takes a huge toll on both the patients and the caregivers, because caregivers, have an outside perspective. And so they're looking at their spouse or their child or their parent, friend, whatever, and paying attention and almost, hyper focusing on Could it be graft-versus-host disease? Could this just be a rash because of medication? And so they're always on guard, and it's a 24-hour job. It's quite an impactful experience for everybody involved. It truly is. Sometimes caregivers need to take on second jobs just so that they can afford the treatment. Sometimes, they have to quit working or work less. And it really does take over life for everybody.
Tell us about this Incyte Ingenuity Award. It's in its third annual run. Tell us what the award is and how this award can give yourself and those like you with Gvhd some hope.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited about this because, the Incyte Ingenuity Award is basically saying to medical professionals, hospitals, organizations, nonprofits, and even individuals who can partner with a larger organization, basically saying, think outside the box, come up with something that you believe will be a lasting and beneficial, whether it's a product or whether it's a training or whatever it may happen to be for patients and their caregivers. And so basically what we're doing is we're awarding 2 awards. There's a $35,000 award and there's a $100,000 award to, think about what would be, it's sort of like the magic wand question, right? So if you could wave a magic wand and come up with, fix the world, fix Gvhd for everyone, what would that be? And so they're given an opportunity to come up with these really creative and innovative ideas and present them and potentially get the funding to put that into existence. And so, I think it's a wonderful opportunity. I think, and I am excited about the previous recipients of the awards and also what is potentially going to come of this in the future. Yeah, I think it's just amazing.
How'd you become a judge?
So, my family's foundation, we connected with Incyte, because there aren't very many organizations that look at graft-versus-host disease, and that's primarily our focus. And so we got together and talked, and my father actually was a judge for the last 2 years. And so then they asked me if I would be a judge this year, and how can I say no? I can't. It's too good. Okay?
What would you say to those who are currently seeking this award as far as being accepted, as far as the scope? It can be just about anything, can it?
It can. It can be absolutely anything. The first award recipients, created an app for patients and caregivers, to help identify symptoms and when to talk to doctors and all of this kind of stuff. And there are opportunities for training more local physicians, like primary care doctors who don't know all about graft-versus-host disease and might need support in treating. And so the scope is pretty huge, and it can be something done by a nonprofit, a patient advocacy organization, in terms of helping to connect patients, because it's hard to find someone else who has this, and then also someone else who has this who is in a local area, and so it can be very isolating. So it goes. You could write a book. People could do basically whatever they want. It does have to be something that is long-term, long-lasting. So it can't be, okay, we're going to do this for a year and then that's going to be that. It's got to be ongoing and sustainable as well as measurable. And so ways of tracking whether or not this is whatever they're created or whatever they've done is working. And so that, I think that helps to kind of, give them a bit of structure around it, because it does have to be a SMART goal, in terms of, is it specific? Is it measurable, attainable, like all of these kinds of things.
Give us a website where we can learn more and apply for the Incyte Ingenuity Award. Yeah.
So the Incyte Ingenuity Awards website is IncyteIngenuityAwards.com. So it's spelled INCYTE CYTEINGENUITY Awards, AWARDS.com. And the closing date for the submissions is June 24th, so there's plenty of time.
Thank you, Meredith, so much for joining us here on Health Professional Radio this morning. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I'm hoping that we can speak again once the awards are, awarded, and we find out how the Gvhd community is going to benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate this. Thank you so much, and I look forward to that as well.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Meredith Cowden. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, listen in, download at SoundCloud, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Health Professional Radio.